Good morning. The title of this talk, Animating God Statues in the Theurgy of Helena Blavatsky. So throughout the writings of Helena Blavatsky, there are multiple references to the word Theurgy. Now, the term Theurgy refers to contemplative fashion, refers to transformative contemplative fashion that has as its ultimate goal union with the divine, or what we call hemenosis. Now, the origins of Theurgy lies with the Platonists of ancient Greece, but it's also a practice that has continued, albeit sometimes, limited to occultists and contemplatives. So for ancient Greeks, the Platonists, Theurgy included meditation, contemplation, ceremony, and ritual. But with the rise of state-supported Christianity within the Roman Empire, Theurgy started to edge and become more and more only the range of philosophy and restricted to just meditation and contemplation. The 3rd century philosopher Iamblichus felt that this trend emptied theurgy of all of its really true purpose and diminished it to simply talk and philosophy. And this is where we get the difference between what's commonly used a word of theology, which literally translates to theologia, God talk, and theurgy, or theologia, God work. So Iamblichus would have sided with the ancient, later philosophers and later Masons and alchemists, who really saw theurgy as God work and used as their motto, ora et labora. So rather than embrace theology, Iamblichus turned instead in his search for theurgy to the most robust pagan system of his time, which was that of the Egyptians. And in the worship, not only priestly and ancient rites available, but also a cosmology and a practice that was in tune with his Platonic ideas. All the cosmos embodied the divine, and humans reach up, and at the same time, the gods reach down to raise us from our station. So HPB makes multiple references to Theurgy in Isis Unveiled. And at first it might seem surprising that the majority of these references occur in volume 1, the volume of science. But then again, we're in the territory that HPB calls occult science, as well as that of the unexplained. And discussed in this work of occult science is a theurgic topic of statue animation. Simply put, statue animation is the perceptions that statues move and somehow are alive. Ancient texts relate how Egyptian statues would nod their heads, gesture, or even talk. And while no puppet-like statues have been found, there's a conjecture among some academics that such mechanical gimmickry was employed by priests to create these effects, especially for oracles. But putting this sort of fakery aside, HPB sees ancient references to statue animation as falling into various camps One was that the statues actually have exoteric and esoteric meanings. Two, that some sort of magnetism, energy was involved, both maybe a physical energy as well as a projected or mesmeristic energy. Three, she talked about the ability of skilled occultists to ensoul their creations, to enliven them. Four, she talked about the role of elementals or other sort of discarnate beings might be involved with these statues. And then finally, that there was the abilities of occultists to use statues as medium and project out their own abilities. So she talks about some of this in an article on Lucifer on idolatry, avatars, and initiations. She goes that the outward form of idolatry is but a veil, concealing one or more of the truth, like the veil of a static goddess. Now, only that truth, being for the few, escapes the majority. To the pious profane, the veil recovers a celestial locality tickled with people of divine beings, dwarfs and giants, and good and wicked powers, all of who are no better than human caricatures. Yet, while for the great majority, space behind the veil is really impenetrable, if it would but confess the real state of its mind, that those endowed with the third eye.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I will cut this from the video. You should repeat the last paragraph when you restart again, but your video camera is off.
My video camera went off.
Yes.
I saw that it flicked on me.
Let me see on YouTube. Oh,
let's see. I can probably.
You should restart. We should start from the beginning again.
You can start from the beginning. Let me.
Just be aware that your video camera will not close.
Yeah, I can probably do something.
It is closed, the camera. Well, you can do without the camera if you want. It's no problem.
You could see the slides, okay?
We can see the slide and listen to your voice. It's okay also. I just have to make you aware that your video continues closed, actually. I cannot see you.
Let's see. Let's try this again.
Okay, now it's showing. Why is your camera closing?
I don't know. I think it might be.
Oh, it closed again. Okay, so we are going to do the following. You have a camera problem. We can do the following. You do you start from the last slides that you were now. You don't have to start from the beginning.
Okay.
And you just start from the beginning of that last slide. And we move forward with your voice, which is fine also. Either way.
That's
okay?
fine. You don't need to see me.
just share the PowerPoint again, please.
Okay. And that was in tune with his Platonic ideas. All the cosmos and books. That was in tune with his Platonic ideas.
Yeah, perhaps you could start from where you say that was in tune with the Platonic ideas. Can you find this? I think it's in the previous slides. Pray and work, or et labora.
Okay. Yeah, let me.
It is where you say
this. That was in tune with his Platonic ideas.
With his Platonic ideas, can you find in your text?
Yeah. I see where that is. I see where that is.
After this, you can start after the. Then you have to change the slide for art et labora again.
Yeah. There we go.
And then You can start after you say Platonic ideas.
Okay. All right.
Okay, you can go on, please.
All the cosmos was embodied with the divine. As humans reach up, the gods reach down to raise us from our station. HPB makes multiple references to Theurgy in Isis Unveiled. It might seem at first surprising that the majority of these references are in volume 1, that of science. But then we are in the territory that HPB calls occult science, as well as that of the unexplained. Discussed in this theurgic topic of statue animation. This is part of it. So simply put, statue animation is the perception that statues can move and are somehow alive. Ancient texts relate how Egyptian statues would nod their heads, gesture, or even talk. And while no puppet-like statues have been found, the conjecture around academics was that such mechanical gimmickry was employed by priests to create this effect, especially for oracles. But putting this sort of fakery aside, HPB sees ancient statue animation as falling into various categories. First, that statues have both an exoteric and an esoteric meaning. Second, that magnetism may be involved, both a physical magnetism or electricity, as well as something projective. 3, that there's the ability of occultists to ensoul their creations. 4, the possible role of elementals or other discarnate beings. And finally, the ability of occultists to use the statues as a medium. Writing in Lucifer magazine in an article on idolatry, avatars, initiations, HPB states, the outward form of idolatry is but a veil, concealing the one truth behind the veil of Satanic goddess. Only that truth being for a few, it escapes the majority. To the pious profane, the veil recovers a celestial locality, thickly peopled with divine beings, dwarfs and giants, good and wicked powers, all of whom are no better than human caricatures. Yet while for the majority, the space behind the veil is really impenetrable, if it would but confess its real state of mind. Those endowed with a third eye discern a Sumerian darkness, a chaos, a light in whose intense radiance all shape born of human consumption disappears, leaving the all-informing divine presence to be felt, not seen, sensed, never expressed. She also cautions in Isis Unveiled that we should not necessarily infer a wide-scale veneration or cult worship based on the proliferation of images. She points out that statues of George Washington abound in the United States, but no one would really suggest him as a god. So she goes on that statues have both a veiled and an unveiled meaning, an esoteric and an exoteric component. Using the occult law of sympathy, statues are often composed of material thought to be sacred or instrumental to the object of the deity energy represented. So combining these materials themselves help produce an animated effect. So as she also says later in Isis Unveiled, magic formed of the last part of sacerdonal science. It investigated nature, power, and the quality of everything sublunary, of elements in their parts, of animals, of various plants and their fruits, of stones and herbs. In short, it explored the essence and power of everything. Hence, it produced effect. And it formed statues, magnetized, which procure health, and made other various figures and things. It made talismans, which could equally be instruments of disease as well as health. And often, too, a celestial fire is made to appear through magic when statues laugh and the lamps are spontaneously kindled. And she points out that electricity can be set in motion, the limbs of a dead frog, and force a dead man's face to express, by contortions of a feature, the most varied emotions from joy to dynamic rage, despair, and horror. That similarly, the pagan priests, unless combined with evidence of the trustworthy men of antiquity cannot be relied upon, could accomplish similar wonders in stone and metal to make them sweat or laugh. The celestial pure fire of a pagan altar was electricity drawn from astral light. Statues, therefore, if properly prepared, might, without accusation of superstition, be allowed to have the property imparting health and disease by contact, as well as modern galvanic belt, electricity, or overcharged battery. The creation of statues, combined artistic skill with that of spiritual intent. In the guild temples, this sort of statue creation also took the form of both a craft and religion in the form of initiations. We have still the writings of the alchemist Zosimas of Panopolis, who lived in the 4th century, that explored both the alchemy of statue making as well as the spiritual pursuit that drove it. Writing in her wonderful biography about Zosimas, Shannon Grives writes, the term that Zosimas uses for alchemy is hieroteche, or sacred art, and it was befitting to the manufacturing the statues of the gods. In this temple complex, Egyptian philosophy is the underlying theoretical model for the creation of divine statues. This creative act is performed in accordance with Mat, the divine order, divine of the universe, divine cosmic order, which is discerned through the observation of the natural world. The materials themselves must undergo a death prior to their creation. And the art of statue making then replicates the creation of the whole world, the divine beings coming into existence out of a molten intellect mass. So being in contact with Mat moves the creation process into a sense of oneness with the divine. For the Egyptians, the goddess Mat represented truth and order, a goodness that Platonists like Imblicus could appreciate. Likewise, to truly create, an artisan had to become a creator god himself. In the Egyptian god Thoth was seen as both the producer and the animator god of all worlds, a sort of demiurge in the Greco-Egyptian world. And he's also the possibility of the source of the Greek god Hephaestus. And again, we're in this realm of henosis, our union with the divine. So the idea that the metals themselves that create the statues must undergo a death is interesting from a point of spiritual alchemy. And this kind of aligns with the 7 steps of modern alchemy, which begins in calcification and ends in coagulation. And this sort of death rebirth of the statues, again, aligns with the most common ceremony we have from Egyptian relics, that of the association of the ceremony of the opening of the mouth. So the opening of the mouth was a ceremony performed by priests during mummification. The ceremony consisted of a mystery play, words of powers, and the intent was to open the mouth in the afterlife to allow speech and breath for the soul to reanimate the body of the deceased. For craftsmen temple priests, the opening of the mouth ritual was used to ensoul the spirit of the god or goddess, the god or goddess's ba, into the statue. The statue itself didn't become the god or goddesses, hence the sort of idolatry that anti-pagan sources would affirm. Rather, the statue becomes a vessel wherein the god or goddess may reside, in a temporary basis. Zosimus points out that not all artisans who created statues were initiated priests, and it was only high-level initiates who could perform the opening of the mouth with into their statues. Lesser statues might be commonly sold, but they didn't possess the embodiment to allow for active participation in the temples. For ancient Egypt, all the earth was divine, and each city had its own god. But the energy of each god was still omnipresence, like sunshine on a cloudy day. And it's because of this relationship with the design that the distinction sometimes between ceremony for human and non-human blurred. The ensouling a statue utilizes the same techniques as the ensouling of the deceased or the lost self. In his book, Embodying Osiris, Tom Kavari explains, by animating the body with consciousness, we are filled with Ak, soul, or what we would call grace. The gods pour into us, and everything in our world is ensouled. We begin life with little self-awareness, but the body carries out basic operations without much conscious thought. But as the mind matures, it becomes capable of incrementally drawing consciousness into the body, not simply reacting to physical needs, but increasingly being attending to its rich spiritual requirements. The Greek and Roman worlds recognized the allure of soul science of the Egyptians. This developed into a synchronism that merged deities. The most famous of these synchronisms is that of Thoth Hermes, which later became Hermes Trismegistus, the legendary father of Hermeticism. In Hermeticism, we see the soul of the individual perfection, kenosis, and within perfection, or purification of the soul. And this is accomplished through self-knowledge or gnosis. Of course, we talk about this in Theosophy, but these ideas aren't new to Theosophists. But it's interesting to kind of see this of how these Egyptian ideas and components self-align to that of modern day Theosophy. We can even look at the bodies in Theosophy compared to that of ancient Egyptians. This chart here is from Gerald and Betty Feeler's Egyptian Magic. So we can see then, as we talk about the Ka as being the basic desire body, the Kabik of the etheric, the Ab, and then of course the Ba as being that sort of higher mind that plays such a part in the opening of the situation and that movement. And of course, the higher realms of the Buddhi relating to Ku, Atma, with the Kabas. And we can see with charts like this of how this sort of, these sort of studying Egyptian was so instrumental in that of early Theosophists. So the attunement of the divine soul was achieved through meditation and rituals and with breath. And breath was the vehicle that imparted the God's part into the statue. The Theurgist would breathe in the hot fire through the divine self and exhale the lower elements of the self's constitution. And cycling through this breath work of the hot, breathing in the hot solar and exhaling out our own individual selves. Cycling through this breathwork, the practitioner achieved a higher state of consciousness, culminating in the transfer into the quickened statue. And all this probably took place within the temple itself. The temple atmosphere itself, along with the conscious preparation, would enable the priest to move into a state of anargia, where he or she would be able to detect the presence of the divine. So the individual's level of anargia, that immersion in the ritual theater, could account for the experience of statue animation. Dr. Campbell Price felt that maybe this alone, actually, aside from maybe some minor mechanical enhancements, could account for reports of statue animation. So an individual expecting a response from an oracle statue would be of the mindset to interpret the slightest gesture as that of a response. Similarly, priests who spent their days in this sacred environment of the temple would interpret the slightest change of scent, stray thought, flicker of the light of the corner of the eye as evidence of animation. So, but attributing all animation, statue animation, to anargia, imagination, or wishful thinking is a bit cynical. It also denies the long history of in occultism of figures such as the Hermaculi or the golem. It denies animated creations created by powerful magicians such as Paracelsus, Kabbalists like Eliza ben Judah. And this our attitude also denies the possibility of telekinesis by devout priests. And such attitude dismisses miracle statues, such as that of the Virgin Mary who cries blood, or those of Ganesh who drink offerings of milk and honey. And then there are the legends of talking heads, the talking head of the Brand the Blessed who protected Britain, and the Knights Templar who were said to carry around heads that gave advice and wisdom. HPB accounts how Thomas Aquinas owned a talking oracle head that had been created by the magician Albertus Magus. The saint eventually smashed it and destroyed the head because apparently it would jabber constantly, which would distract him from his mathematical pursuits. aside from Catholicism, Hinduism in modern times, we also have talking heads associated with Santeria and New Age movements. In Santeria, one of the early initiations is the bestowing of the elegua, on the neophyte. The elegua is a sculpted head created by the Santerian priest, specifically for the neophyte practitioner. And it's out of herbs and metals and all sorts of sacred things. The practitioner is instructed how to feed and care and offer sacrifices to the deity Elegua, who's embodied in the sculpted head. In turn, they can ask favors or advice. And recipients who have done this, I've talked with, quickly report hearing voices from the statue, mysteriously finding changes in Elegua's stations. And similar actions are observed in New Age circles or other magical magicians working with crystal skulls. By projecting actions, projecting high consciousness energy, not dissimilar to that of what Imblicus calls hot solar fire. Some crystal skulls can take on oracular qualities. Crystal skull practitioners see the skulls as being imbued or almost possessed by an independent entity. Others see skulls as being a projection of their own unconscious self, an element of their psyche that allows them through this sort of concept to converse. And of course, the truth is probably somewhere in between of whether it's a self or an external being. And the possibility for sort of channeling from external sources also exists. So as we go along here in Luxor, we'll have ample opportunities to interact with ancient statues. And maybe we open ourselves to the experience and experience these statues from us, around us, as vehicles to the divine. Thank you.